Set to go. Alert. Now resume.
For the record, Lead Initial T, appearing as counsel for the Conservation Coalition. I've spoken with you before, Dr. Richards. You may recollect that on November 3rd and 4th, you were in attendance, and I had the privilege to cross-examine you at that time on different topics. But I may find that I may revisit some of those same topics with you today. You're the regional director and head of science for the Pacific region, as I understand it.
Yes, that's correct.
And you have a number of scientists who report to you.
Yes,
You in turn report to the regional director general.
that's correct.
And do you also report to the Assistant Deputy Minister for Science, Dr. Matheny?
We have a somewhat complex matrix organization, so I have a line reporting relationship to the regional director general. I have a functional reporting relationship to the Assistant Deputy Minister, but the name has changed. It's Oceans and Science. That name change occurred roughly a year ago.
All right. And all of you in turn report to the minister. I mean, it's the minister who's ultimately responsible for
Well, the deputy
operations.
minister, I guess that's we report direct to the deputy minister. We are public servants.
Right. And from time to time, you may provide advice to the minister, and the minister is the entity that's responsible for answering for your actions in the confines of Parliament. Is that right?
Yeah, as far as I understand. Parliamentary democracy, yes.
Which is all perplexing to me because these speeches that I'm going to get to in a moment are all written on behalf of members of Parliament as opposed to the minister. Is that not correct?
This whole issue around these speeches, I was really only very peripherally involved. So if you want to ask those kinds of details, I think my understanding of that is not perhaps what it could be with some others that you could ask on this topic.
Well, let me try it with you, and if you want to defer the questions, that's fine. Hopefully we can find someone who can answer them in due course. And I want to begin by looking at the email exchange that I find which is now marked as Exhibit 622, Mr. Lunn. You're familiar with this because
Yes.
before you came here, you reviewed all of these materials, did you not?
Yes, that's correct.
And this seems to be an email exchange from a fellow by the name of Terrence Davis, who's the regional director for communications in your region. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And if I look at the second page of that email exchange, there's an email from Mr. Davis, and I find these words about the middle of the page. Essentially in the debate, and they're talking about a debate that's going to unfold or may unfold in Parliament, members of the government will put forward the department's arguments, positions, information on Pacific salmon. The MPs are essentially speaking for the department and representing us in the House. Now, you know that that's inaccurate, do you not? It's not the role of MPs to defend the department in the House. It's the role of the minister. You know that's wrong, isn't it?
Well, that's you're the legal team. That's not my area of expertise.
All right, but you just told me that it's not your job to advise members of Parliament. It's your job to advise the minister, is it not?
My job is to provide the best information I can up through my lines of communication.
Right, and that includes through the ministerial lines of communication, isn't that correct?
Up to the minister when I'm asked to do that, yes.
All right. If I could have Exhibit 630, I found this document to be very interesting. It's a document that your own counsel put in through you. It's entitled Speechwriting at DFO, Roles, Responsibilities, and Processes. You're familiar with this document, are you?
Actually, no, I'm not.
You're not familiar with it, and yet your counsel put it in through you?
No, I didn't. I put it in by agreement.
I'm sorry. Mr. Taylor's correct. I stand corrected. Have you read the document before?
I'm not familiar with this document.
So I can't ask you any questions about it. You would just decry any interest or any knowledge of the document?
Well, on this kind of topic, I think that there are others within the department who would be better positioned to answer.
Well, let me just put the question to you and see if you can answer it. Under the heading number 2, House Speeches, second page, I think just scroll up a little bit more. Thank you. There's an entity known as the OPI, the Office of Primary Interest, and I find these words: for every issue, motion, or legislative initiative introduced or debated in the House and Senate that relates to the mandate of Fisheries and Oceans Canada, there is a departmental OPI. And then in bold, please note that HQ, I would take that to mean Headquarters Communications, is never the OPI for a House speech. So you're not aware of this policy, and you were not aware of it at the time that you were being requested to provide information for House speeches?
I was following a request for others that I work with in the region for their assistance. Normally, this kind of issue is dealt with through the National Headquarters Group and not through the region.
Nonetheless, you did get involved in reviewing some of these speeches that were going to be used.
I was asked to review some speeches for accuracy.
And for example, if I could ask you to turn to Exhibit 624. There's an email, and that's the one I want to start with. This is an email from Allison Webb to yourself, and it appears that Ms. Webb is the Regional Director for Policy Branch within your region. Is that correct?
That she was in that position at that time.
Right. And she's asking you for commentary on the speech which is attached to that email. Is that correct?
She's asking me to look at it for factual correctness.
And then if we can turn to Exhibit 625, I find an email also from Ms. Webb in which you're copied. The central email appears to go to a person by the name of Tom Robbins. What position does he occupy, do you know?
He is a communications advisor within Pacific Region Communications.
And then it also is copied, or it also goes to Terry Davis, and we've already come across him, and then it's copied to you. And Ms. Webb says, this speech may be a little short now, but after speaking with Laura Richards, we had some strong concerns over some of the information contained, which was not factually accurate, so needed to delete it. We have redrafted. Further, Laura suggested that you may be able to find some information on Alexandra Morton's website, which points to some successes with respect to sea lice and pink salmon survival. So this is the speech that essentially deals with sea lice, is it not?
It could be.
If we can pull it up,
yeah.
Mr. Lund, 625. The speech that's attached. Speaking notes for a member of parliament. And if we look at page 2 of the text, for example, it talks about the aquaculture industry. And I see this paragraph, that is why the Government of Canada has invested $23.5 million over 5 years as part of the Aquaculture Innovation and Market Access Program to help establish a vibrant and sustainable Canadian aquaculture industry. Are those the kind of facts that you're double checking?
No, they would not be.
That's because you're a doctor of science, not a doctor of spin, isn't that right?
Well, that particular program was not a program that was dealt with through the science program.
So you're simply looking at these speeches from an aspect of commenting on the science.
That's correct.
Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Now, I heard your evidence earlier when you were giving your evidence to Mr. Taylor, or through Mr. Taylor, that you had some concerns about some of the scientists attending at external meetings. And as I understand your evidence, you were concerned about the messaging that might come out in light of this commission being called.
No, I think that's a misrepresentation of what I had at least intended to say. I don't have problems with scientists attending external meetings. I think what happened in this context is if there was going to be something important, that was going to be something new that was going to be announced, I just wanted to make sure that I had a chance to give a heads up through the system before that happened. I think that's one point I made. The other point was, in the particular context we're discussing, we were not sure what was appropriate for our role as federal public servants in the context of a commission of inquiry having just been announced.
All right. If I can examine with you Exhibit 627, please. This is an email exchange. It looks as though if I ask you to track through to the second page, I see an email from you to Mr. Sprout in the middle of the page there. Let me just highlight that, blow it up. Thank you. In which you write to Mr. Sprout on November 3, 2009, Paul, do you support participation in the PSF event next week? I am concerned about how we coordinate all the proposed meetings on Fraser Sockeye. The meeting proposed by Brian includes a number of external participants and could raise issues where we have work in progress that has not yet been reported publicly. What are you referring to there, the report in progress that has not been reported publicly?
Well, I think I was mostly concerned about the work that we informed about within the briefing note related to the disease impacts.
All right, so you're concerned about that information being released publicly.
I was concerned about it being released publicly prior to briefing up, which is why the note goes on to say that I've instructed them to write a briefing note so that we could do this, so that we could then proceed to talk about that work.
And as it turned out, did any of DFO scientists attend that PSF meeting?
I believe in the end, I can't recall whether that meeting actually did happen at that time, but no, as I mentioned, that was just at the time when the commission had just been announced. We were trying to sort out what we could and couldn't do and what was appropriate. And there was a decision, it wasn't made by me, but there was a decision that DFO staff would not participate in these types of external meetings while we're sorting out what's happening in terms of the process with this new commission. And this was one of those external meetings.
Well, this is written before the commission was announced, was it not? The commission was announced on November the 6th, 2009.
Okay, well, I can't remember. Sorry, then perhaps we were perhaps anticipating an announcement, or there was something that was going on, but we were expecting something to be announced and therefore just uncertain about how to proceed. So that was the context.
There was a meeting held by academics under the auspices of Simon Fraser University, a workshop to examine the potential for decline in the 2009 returns. And December of 2009, do you recollect that?
Yes.
And none of your scientists were permitted to attend that, were they?
That's correct. That was part of the same decision that affected this suite of meetings.
Now, when I was here before with you, one of the issues that I put into evidence was a Globe and Mail article that Mr. Sprout authored. If we can have Exhibit 60, please, Mr. Lund. This is a letter to the Globe and Mail from Mr. Sprout. You may recall me putting this into evidence through Mr. Sprout when he was on a panel with you and Dr. Mathany and a few other people.
Yes, I recall that.
Did you have any anything to do with this particular note that went to the Globe and Mail?
I would have commented on this note.
I'll get to that in a moment, but I wonder if I can start with taking a look at, Mr. McDade has asked me because of lack of time to put some documents to the witness. I'm going to accommodate him in that regard, Mr. Commissioner. If I can have tab 27 of the Aquaculture Coalition's documents, please. You should have before you a memorandum for the minister, strategy to address the issue of sea lice and salmon farms in the Pacific region. And if you turn to the last page of it, it appears as though you may be either one of the authors or may be involved in this. There's A. Thompson, L. Richards, that would be yourself. Is that right?
That would have been myself. Andy Thompson would have drafted this note.
All right. And you would have reviewed that note, would you?
The normal process would have been that I would have reviewed that note.
Could we have that marked as the next exhibit, please?
Exhibit 640.
Tab 28, please. This is an email exchange from Mr. Terry Davis. We know who he is. He's the Director of Communications for your region, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And he's writing to Dr. Riddell, who at the time was, it appears to have still been associated with Department of Fisheries and Oceans.
Yes, he would have been at that time, he would have been the manager of the group that Mark Saunders now leads.
And you were copied on this note, were you not?
My name is there, yes.
Do you recall this email?
I must say I do pay more attention to email, which I'm directly sent than those that I'm just copied on. But I do recall that there was some question about what we could get in terms of various evidence from our own work on this particular topic.
All right. I'm curious about the first sentence. Have we done any sampling that would counteract the findings of Alexandra sockeye research near the Discovery Islands? That would be Dr. Alexandra Morton's work, is that right?
Yes.
Is DFO in the business of trying to counteract the work of other scientists?
DFO is in the business of trying objectively to get to the truth.
Could we have this marked as the next exhibit, please?
Exhibit 641.
Tab 29, please. This is a memorandum for the minister entitled New Research Results on the Interactions Between Sea Lice and Juvenile Pink Salmon. Did you have a hand to play with respect to either the drafting or reviewing of this particular memorandum?
Yes. I assume I did, yes. Since the subtitle has got the note on it that these are my revisions in this document, so.
And under the analysis portion, there's a statement. This is the first departmental, this is second page, thank you, Mr. Lunn. Analysis, this is the first departmental confirmation of lice-induced mortality on wild salmon and will likely be used by INGOs to support their claims that salmon aquaculture farms cause an increase in wild salmon mortality rates through the spread of sea lice. That was something that you either authored or vetted, was it?
I probably did not author this, but I assume from the way that this is recorded is that I did vet this. I did not get these documents in time to go back and trace my own email records on this, but I presume from what I can infer that that's correct.
All right. Could this be marked as the next exhibit, please?
Exhibit 642.
Now, tab 30, please. This is the email I was looking for with respect to the Globe and Mail article that I showed you earlier, or the Globe and Mail letter from Mr. Sprout. It's an email from Terry Davis dated August 19, 2009. It's sent directly to yourself from Mr. Davis, in which he says, I spoke to Paul Sprout on this. He's concerned about backing away from the wording we used in the media lines in the letter to the editor of the Globe. The media line states sea lice from salmon farms, and it goes on to basically quote from the Globe and Mail. So you did receive this from Mr. Davis, did you?
Yeah, yes, I did.
Next exhibit, please. Yes,
Do you wish to mark that?
Yes.
Document that was
Sorry.
tab 30, the 643.
And yes, you have 9 minutes left.
Thank you. Tab 31, please, of the Aquaculture Coalition's documents. This appears to be an email exchange written around that same time frame. And the first one is a email that you wrote to Mr. Davis, which responded to an email that he sent to you the same date. Do you recall this?
I do not recall this specifically.
But you're not denying that you did in fact send this email?
I'm not denying that I sent the email. No, it's clearly I sent this email.
The email from Mr. Davis says that Alexandra Morton has submitted a letter that she has written to the minister, to the Georgia Strait, and other media outlets. It has been published in the Strait as well as in the Courier Islander. I have written a possible response for your consideration and would like your advice on whether we should respond. So that's basically what you're doing there. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Might this be marked as the next exhibit, please?
644.
Now, looking back through the memorandum to the minister and to what was unfolding back in 2009 and early 2010 around trying to explain the declines in the 2009 return, it struck me that there seemed to be almost an inordinate amount of time being spent on saying why sea lice was not necessarily the cause for the decline. Can you explain why so much attention was being focused upon sea lice back then?
I think the attention that was being focused on sea lice was in response to other work that was being done, in response to other things that were being published in the media, and that's why that was becoming apparent.
So you as a scientist are then in the business of essentially responding to media letters to the editor, letters that appear in the media. And it troubles me because when you attended earlier, some of the questions I put to you and to Dr. Mathani specifically were that scientists should be careful to insulate themselves from becoming too political, from becoming protagonists too much for either what their department was advocating or what their minister was advocating. Do you recall that general tenor of the discussion that I had with you and Dr. Mathani on that occasion?
Yes, and I think I also need to correct exactly what you said. It's not that I am not writing letters to the media. I am providing factual information that is going into those letters.
But do you agree?
If there is something that's coming out that is technically incorrect, or that we think is, the kind of things where I might be more involved is if there is something seen to be critical of DFO science, because I also seem that I need to be supportive of our staff and our processes. So, but what we are trying to do is be as factually and provide the technical information and trying to be as objective as possible.
But do you agree with me that it's a very fine line between vetting an email or vetting a potential media release from Department of Fisheries and Oceans for accuracy and actually spinning that in terms of how that is going to be portrayed in the media? There's a very fine line there, is it not?
I don't dispute that there are lines all over this work, yes, but as I do want to emphasize is that it's important that, for our perspective, that science is seen to be objective, and we try to maintain that objectivity.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Ms. Gertner?
It's Brenda Gertner for the First Nations Coalition, and with me, Leah Pence. Dr. Richards, I have just 4 or 5 questions of you, depending on how we go from there. Dr. Richards, given the Crown's obligations to First Nations, including the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, what steps have you taken, and also given the importance of Fraser River sockeye to First Nations that you're very aware of, what steps have you taken to ensure that First Nations have been provided the scientific information and work which has informed the briefing notes of December 09 and March 10th that have been the subject of discussion today?
Well, I think that, basically in terms of our work with First Nations, we will work through, I will work through my colleagues and have some of this, a lot of the information is communicated through the Fraser Panel, through the Pacific Salmon Commission, where we do have First Nation representatives.
What specific steps have you taken as Regional Director of Science in the Pacific Coast to make sure this information is getting to First Nations?
I have supported the attendance of staff at specific meetings.
In which meetings? What staff? This is a very serious matter, Dr. Richards. What information has been provided to First Nations regarding viral diseases and its potential impacts on Fraser sockeye salmon?
Right. I think first of all, I want to be clear that we are still trying to get more information on this whole issue around the purported virus. What we're trying to do is go forward with facts, and we are still trying to work and find out what exactly is going on. That information was, some of this information was presented, for example, at the Pacific Salmon Commission sponsored meeting. There were members of the Fraser Panel that were in attendance at that meeting.
So that's general information around the reports that have been provided. What have you told your managers that they need to bring this information to First Nations and the implications of this to their rights and the potential implications to Fraser River sockeye?
Well, I think at this point we're still trying to sort out what we're trying to understand this issue ourselves.
Dr. Richards, we've heard lots of evidence in this inquiry about uncertainties and how it's always difficult for scientists to come to certain outcomes. It is not scientists, as what we've heard from many people from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, that are supposed to balance those uncertainties. That's to come to those whose rights are going to be directly affected. What steps have you taken?
Well, what I'm doing is supporting my staff in various things. I know staff are involved with others. I can't say that there are things that are directly that we are doing. We are working in general through various consultative processes that are organized by other sectors of the department. That's the way that we normally operate.
You appreciate the potential devastating effect this could have on the exercise of Section 35 rights by people that have a relationship to Fraser River sockeye.
I think this is just one piece of this overall story. What we're trying to do is understand what the story is.
They appreciate that there may be other pieces. This one piece could be very important to them. They did not fish in 2009. Mm-hmm. What steps did you take to make sure they know about what your scientists are learning?
Well, we're still trying to as I mentioned, I think this story is very much still unfolding.
So can I take it that you haven't taken steps to make sure that they know?
I have not taken personal steps, if that's the question is you're asking, but the work is that we have been following our normal processes. There are others in the department who are doing those direct consultations.
Dr. Richards, you're also aware that many First Nations, or some First Nations, have informed the Department of Fisheries that they are concerned that there may be conflicts between your obligations regarding Fraser River wild sockeye salmon and aquaculture. Do you agree that given those concerns, it will be incumbent upon you to make sure there are fulsome sharing of information on all of these objective scientific facts that you're unfolding?
I think it's just a question, we're trying to talk about the process here.
No, I'm talking about process. What process are you using and relying upon to make sure First Nations are getting this information?
I fundamentally rely on working with my colleagues in the department who have more direct responsibility with First Nations.
Then I need to know what colleagues you relied upon to make sure this information was getting to First Nations in a timely manner, and where is
I think at this point we have not been. I would say we're still trying to develop this information, and that's what this inquiry is all about.
But you appreciate that it's not science that's going to measure is going to experience the risks and uncertainties.
But we also know that there are still lots of questions about this, and
there will always be questions, Dr.
Yes,
Richards.
but we're talking about is a field that is going. This particular piece that we're talking about is something that is rapidly changing, rapidly getting some new information, and we're all trying to come to grips with what this means so that we can explain it.
Dr. Richards, was Dr. Miller also told not to speak to First Nations?
Not to my. I'm not aware of any discussion on that topic.
So she was just told not to talk to the media?
I'm not aware of her, other than in the context of this one publication.
Given the obvious importance of this work to my client's interests, and given the Federal Crown's obligations to First Nations, how is it, Dr. Richards, that in response to Mr. McDade's questions today regarding the funding of this ongoing work, and as I understand the information before us, it's funding that's less than $100,000, why is it that you couldn't come today to tell us that this work is being done?
Well, that's not an accurate account of the evidence.
She has not been able to confirm that this work has been done, nor has it been funded.
Dr. Richards has said that she doesn't have specifics. Some has, she thinks, and some work is ongoing. She's testified to it, and other work she's not sure about.
Dr. Richards?
We have, if I could, what I have done is I've done everything possible that I could to make sure that Dr. Miller had funding to continue this work. Some of the things that you've looked at are proposals. I think in her own mind, the importance of some of this stuff is changing and evolving. So, and I wasn't able, given the timing of when I got this information, I was not able to go and verify those specific pieces and to know, and sometimes even if we put in a proposal, the work doesn't actually transpire because of other things that happen along the way. So I know that this would have had a high priority, and we would have done everything possible to provide funding to her to do this, at least for the highest priority pieces of this work. Exactly where things are, I can't answer today.
Having reviewed the briefing materials that have been filed today and your responses, it doesn't appear in any of the briefing materials that have been filed today that the Crown's obligations to inform First Nations about the potential impacts of something like a virus on their rights was ever a next step. Do you agree with me?
That would not have been something that we would have thought of, that I would have put in, because that, what we're trying to do is get up the scientific evidence.
But you're giving advice to the ministers on what next steps need to be taken given the information
from
that
the
you're
point
learning.
of view of science within the department.
But you appreciate, as the regional director of science, that this information could have very strong impacts on First Nations rights.
Well, and I think it can have impacts on others too. I don't dispute what you're saying. That yes, but again, we're trying to make sure that we can move forward and get more. We're trying to work with the information that we had, and my job is to inform up the line as a first step.
Perhaps just one final general question then, Mr. Commissioner. As a regional director of science, when you're considering and making decisions regarding the research you're going to do, the next steps you're going to take, all of those things, do you consider the Crown's obligations to First Nations?
That's generally not at the forefront. That would be certainly that would come into play in some pieces of the work we do. We have a very large science program. It would certainly come into play on some of the stock assessment work that we do, and we, as I say, work with others and consult with others in the department who are probably working more closely on some of these files.
But for some reason, it didn't come to play when you were looking at the causes, one of the primary causes of decline in 2009, when Fraser First Nations were not fishing?
I mean, our job, I'm looking at my job is to try to find the science advice that I can pass over to then others in the department who are more active in some of these other consultative issues that you mentioned.
But you didn't advise the minister that he should take steps to inform First Nations?
My recommendations were based on the science of what we should be doing and following to the best of my knowledge and trying to update next steps on the science.
Those are my questions, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you, Ms. Gardner. Mr. Commissioner, those are all the questions, questioners in cross-examination. Mr. Taylor informs me he has 3 questions in re-examination. I have 2. And if I might just say at this point to Mr. Commissioner, I would like to thank all council for working so hard to make this work out today.
Yes, I would. I'd like to add to that, Mr. Wallace. Council throughout have been gracious in accommodating the Commission Council's requests for time limits, and I'm personally grateful to all of them for being so cooperative. I just have one question. I just want to ask Dr. Richards, if you don't mind, and then maybe Mr. Taylor will follow up. Dr. Richards, in fairness to you, I don't have a transcript in front of me, so I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but my question is this. I think I recall, I did make a note, but it wasn't verbatim, that in an answer to, I think it was Mr. McDade, I'm doing a lot of thinking here because I don't have the transcript in front of me, I believe it was Mr. McDade, in reference to a position or an opinion that had been expressed by Dr. Miller, I think you used the words, that was her personal opinion or personal view or something like that, and I apologize to you for not having the exact words. I'm not sure I quite followed that. Were you suggesting that she did something on her personal time, or did you mean, I'm not sure exactly what you meant by that.
What I meant was that, sorry. Yes, Mr. Commissioner, what I meant was that this was work, I mean, obviously the work that she's doing is really very much on the cutting edge. And what she was doing was really doing some speculations on her part, which is a part of the normal scientific process and the way that science operates. But I think others within the group or other fish health experts may have had some different points of view than that. So what I was trying to infer was that those were, that was her view at the time. It wasn't necessarily shared by everyone else in the group.
Thank you very much.
And part of my job was to try to then balance some different points of view.
Thank you very much.
I had 3 questions when Mr. Wallace asked me about 2 o'clock, but it's now almost 4 o'clock, so I've found a couple more. Dr. Richards, as I heard the questioning from Mr. McDade, there was a certain undercurrent to them that was suggesting that science should hurry along, particularly with regard to the viral disease that has been postulated. Can science go any faster than the research and facts will allow?
I mean, we would very much like this to be sped along, and we have been trying to very much encourage this work to move forward. But this is, I mean, basically this is a very challenging topic and it's difficult. And so I think we've been moving on this as quickly as we can.
There seemed to be another undercurrent to Mr. McDade's questions that DFO is not forthcoming on the risks of disease and or underplays the risk. What's your response to that?
Well, I think we have been upfront in putting some of these factors in the notes that we were preparing. We have certainly have been talking about these in some other forums and some other meetings. We have been encouraging development and trying to get forward the full story on what's actually going on, and this is a story that's still developing.
There is now Exhibit 640, which is a document that perhaps Mr. Lund could bring up to refresh your memory. It comes from tab 27 of the aquaculture documents. This is a briefing note. You may need to see more pages there, but can you determine from that whether it's a draft or a final version?
That would have, I'm assuming that would have been a draft version.
Mr. Leadham suggested in his questions to you that as a scientist and as the head of science branch, that there was an element of becoming political or a protagonist in providing input to media lines. Is the work that you do that is subject of today's evidence regarding media lines and or providing input to potential speeches for that matter, a small or a large portion of your work as a scientist and as the head of science branch?
I think it's a relatively small portion of the work that I actually do.
Is it the case nonetheless that in the context of a government department, in particular a department like Fisheries, which is science-based, that it is something that needs to be done in the course of your work? That is to say, science needs to provide input to media lines when requested, and speeches for that matter.
Well, certainly what we need to do is make sure if we have factual information that it is known and to try to contribute, and there are various ways that we do that. This is one way. Probably another way is something we also discussed earlier, which would be through our CSS process, Center for Science Advice, and that would be a more formal way that we would provide advice into the department.
Ms. Gertner asked you questions about what DFO, or more particularly the science branch, did or didn't say or inform First Nations of about information. I was never clear from her questions what information precisely we're talking about, but nonetheless, it's in the context of disease. My question of you is, do you know whether First Nations have science advisors?
In some cases that they do, in other cases they do not. So there is a bit of a mixture within the organizations.
Do scientists talk to scientists?
Absolutely they do.
And share information?
Yes.
And does that include DFO scientists talking to First Nation retained scientists?
Where that opportunity and exists, yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Commissioner, Dr. Richards, I just have two questions about two documents. I wonder, Mr. Lunn, if you could pull up Exhibit 615, which, Dr. Richards, you'll find at tab 4 in the binder that the Commission. Mr. McDade asked you about that document, about the early version of the factors causing decline briefing note. And in your evidence in responding to some of his questions about that memo, you said that those early statements were those of Mark Saunders, and they were Mark Saunders' views and not yours. I'm looking at the email that is at the first page of tab 4, and I'm just, it says here in Mr. Saunders' email to you, hi Laura, still needs summary bullets. Hopefully this is closer, could see more hypothesis and so on. That suggests to me that the version of the briefing note attached was produced by Mr. Saunders in response to a question from you, and that the bullets that Mr. McDade took you to in that Mr. Saunders was trying to reflect what you had asked him to reflect. Is that fair?
I think no. I think certainly Mr. Saunders was the one who did the drafting of these notes. I think I would have perhaps discussed with him an overall approach about, but a lot of the way that this was formulated was really the thinking of Mr. Saunders.
Did you recall what it was that you asked him to do in producing this memo in those bullets?
I'm sorry, but no, I don't recall that specific discussion. I think one of the things we were talking about was just in terms of how to organize the material to make it as clear as possible in going forward. I think the way that this was sort of organized in terms of the magnitude of the impact was one of the pieces we were hoping to help bring some clarity to a very confusing and potentially complex issue.
Thank you. The second question I have at this point is with respect to Exhibit 643, which is tab 29 of the Aquaculture Coalition documents. And in that, your evidence was in response to Mr. Leadham. Could you pull up 642? I think I have the wrong number. Thank you. It's 640. Sorry, I was wrong, Dr. Richards. It's 642. In an answer to a question from Mr. Leadham, you said you weren't sure if you were involved as a drafter. Well, we have the benefit of technology here that you don't have in front of you, and I wonder if Mr. Lund, you could pull up the reference from our documents that we gave to you before, CAN 286996. And this appears to be, or this is the email that was covering the document, which is now 642. And I'm wondering if that just perhaps refreshes your memory that you appear to have been involved in drafting that document.
Sorry, if you had heard that I said I wasn't, I think that was incorrect.
No. You didn't say, you didn't deny it. You said you didn't know.
Well, I was just saying I was looking at the name attached to the file, which suggests that I did do it because that was the way that I would have named a file. So therefore, I did touch that document.
Yes. All right. I just wanted to make the record clear as to, and this I think does. So I wonder, Mr.
Well, I think in fairness to the witness, she specifically pointed in her evidence, in answer to whatever lawyer was asking the question, to the note at the bottom about L. Richards' RIV.
I agree. This is I'm producing this as the covering. Is that the one? The covering email, in any event, it's a cover email, and I would ask Mr. Lund that that be marked as 642A.
You so marked?
Mr. Commissioner, I have no further questions, and Dr. Richards, thank you very much for your attendance here today.
Yes, Dr. Richards, may I also thank you for your willingness to return today and answering the questions of all council who put questions to you. Thank you very much. And to all the other council, as you know, we're adjourned after. Oh, did Mr. Taylor have another question? No, he just looks questionable.
I'm just slow on finding CAN numbers, tabs, and exhibits.
Sorry, I thought you had another question. As you know, we're adjourned now. I think it's until April 4th, Monday, April 4th. And so, as my grandchildren call it spring break, I don't know what you call it. When our teachers used to tell us that, there was a collective hooray in the room. And so I'm sure silently there's a collective hooray in this room as well. But I wish you a well-spent, hopefully a little bit of relaxation time over the next couple of weeks as we gear up for the balance of our hearings. And I thank you all again. As Mr. Wallace said, many of you have been here most days, some of you have not been, but there has been a great degree of cooperation, and I'm always grateful when council are able to do that. It makes my work and hopefully your work more pleasant and more efficient. I'm sorry, Mr. Giles, did you? Mr. Giles, who keeps a record of this apparently, tells me we're at day 58, exhibit 644. We've heard, I think, 70 witnesses. I'm not sure what the recalled is. Is that 38 recalled?
38 recalled with a break in between.
Ah, I see. So for those of you who don't have enough data and statistics in front of you, you can add this to your body of information. Thank you all very much again, and enjoy your break.
Hearing is now adjourned till Monday, April the 4th at 10 a.m.
John, could you bring these to me when you get a chance? Sir, thank you very much.